What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, June 21st, 2016, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And, yes, just as we go on the microphone, the server comes under attack again. There's obviously something here that somebody doesn't want you to know about. And basically, such underhanded methods are an admission. They understand they can't win an open debate on facts, logic, and law, so they have to cheat, which they think is their divine right because of some rationale in their brain. We don't care if we're right or wrong. We're going to do what we feel we need to do. We serve a higher purpose, which, by the way, has been a major part of the groupthink that has led to so many disasters in the Iraq War and so forth. It's an endless situation. David Halberstam, when he was writing The Best and the Brightest, was talking about how these individuals that were in positions of power somehow felt that their positions gave them the right to do things that ordinary people would find objectionable because they served a higher purpose. And that was their little gross self-deception that allowed them to basically go on out and do things which, in a fair and just world, would put them in a war crimes tribunal over there in Europe. Now then, getting on to the political campaign, it is really starting to heat up between Hillary and Donald Trump, and it doesn't help Trump that the GOP leadership wants him out. Apparently the GOP leadership is perfectly fine with putting Hillary Clinton in the White House, and they're willing to betray their own rank-and-file voters to do it. We'll have a little bit more on that later on here. Tavis Smiley is out there saying Hillary Clinton is taking money from Wall Street like nobody's business and still insisting that she's not going to be in anybody's pocket. That's ridiculous. Don't forget that RICO lawsuit Larry Klayman brought against the Clinton Foundation. Foreign governments that donated to the foundation got preferential treatment at the State Department. Now, Hillary does have a huge amount of money to work with. She is outspending Donald Trump $23 million to zip on an ad campaign in 8 of the battleground states. And Donald Trump has now put out a call to ordinary Americans like you and I. He needs donations. And you can go to his website. We've got a permanent link from my main page, and you can donate. And the only way we're going to get the big money influence out of American politics is for all the little money to join together in bringing about a peaceful revolution to our current fascist economic dictatorship. Now, there's an interesting little article talking about double standards here over in Op-Ed News, basically saying we know Hillary Clinton broke laws that other people have been prosecuted for breaking. We know she's guilty of breaking Title 18, Section 793. She's committed the same crimes Petraeus did, for which he lost his job. Obama's campaign against whistleblowers has come down on people who have released classified information. But when it comes to Hillary Clinton, Obama is out there saying, well, there's classified and there's classified. And it's a big nothing. There's a video we have on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. It's sort of son of 7 minutes of Hillary Clinton lying. This one is an hour long. It's a feature film documentary of Hillary Clinton lying, deceiving, and just being Hillary Clinton in general. Now, there's a new situation that is rapidly evolving, and it has to do with former Secret Service officer Gary Byrd, who's got his new book, Crisis of Character, coming out next Monday. It's already a top seller over at Amazon. Everybody is buying this book, and we even put the link to the Amazon page on my page so you can go and get this thing. And he's trying to get all these TV interviews set up, and what we're beginning to see is the corporate media wants to blacklist this guy. They want to make him go away, because he's a threat to their darling Hillary Clinton. So, Gary, if you're listening to this show, first of all, I want to have you on my show for an interview. And second, stay out of small airplanes and stay out of Fort Marcy Park, because you are a major, major threat to Hillary. And people who are threats to Hillary have a very short life expectancy. Now, speaking of media blacklisting and cover-up, the corporate media is not covering any of these lawsuits into election fraud committed by Hillary against Bernie Sanders. They're not covering these studies that came out of Berkeley, Stanford, and Harvard, saying that Hillary could not possibly have the numbers she's got without major, widespread epidemic election fraud. And remember, some of the leaked emails that have come on out confirm the corporate media were trying to help Hillary as much as possible. And this was some of the emails that came out from Guccifer 2. Okay, now a quick little welcome to our on-air affiliates who are just now joining us. We're talking about Hillary Clinton. We're talking about Gary Burns' new book, Crisis of Character. We're talking about the election fraud and how the corporate media is absolutely ignoring the story. There's a lawsuit in California, a separate lawsuit in San Diego, another lawsuit in Ohio that's actually covering 11 states. Now, over at nationofchange.org, they're reminding everybody there are still 2 million provisional votes that have never been counted in the California primary. There are enough of these uncounted votes to reverse the election, because most of the provisional ballots were being handed out to Bernie Sanders supporters who got caught in that voter registration snafu, where when they wanted to be no party preference, they put down independent and wound up getting a ballot for the American Independent Party. And Greg Palast is out there saying, basically, if all the votes were counted equally and fairly, Bernie Sanders would have won California. It's a crooked election. And finally, over at change.org, they're literally putting out a request to have the United Nations come on in and monitor the rest of the elections this season. And if the United Nations decides to do so, the U.S. government cannot refuse. And I think it's time that we had some kind of oversight on our elections, including that software inside those electronic voting machines, which, again, over at blackboxvoting.org, Bev Harris have proved those electronic machines are wide open to fraud. They even had an HBO documentary about it, Hacking Democracy. If you've not seen that, hunt it down somewhere and watch that. It's an absolute disgrace and a scandal. All right, we're going to grab a quick phone call. Scott in Virginia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I just was reading something fascinating in reference to the Joe Cox tragedy.
Yes.
There was something very similar to this that happened back in 2003 in Sweden.
Yes.
It was right. They were having a referendum. It's very unusual how alike these situations were. But a female politician by the name of Anna Lent.
Yes.
4 days before the referendum was stabbed to death. She was a liberal. She was stabbed to death on all dates September 11th of 2003, right before a referendum concerning the euro. And I don't know if you remember that. Remember the shooting that they had in Canada at the Parliament building?
Yes, I remember that one as well.
I think you comment on the fact that something like 20-some-odd years before that happened in Canada, almost the same exact thing, where the Sergeant of Arms was the hero of a Parliament attack. I think it was in Toronto, their Parliament, or their state or provincial government.
Well,
gunmen went in there.
We know that assassinations are carried out for political gain, no question. They're trying to exploit Joe Cox and play for sympathy. to bolster the Remain vote. We know that when Lind was assassinated, first of all, she was shopping in a department store and for some reason did not have her security detail with her. And they made her into a martyr to try and sway that referendum as well. Now, when you look at how much vested interest there is in maintaining the European Union, the European Central Bank wants to go on fleecing the European people. The unelected European Union commissioners want to go on with their little dictatorship. You have all of these various economies that are going to be shaken badly by a Brexit. You have the New World Order people who would you look at the Brexit as triggering a dissolving of the European Union, and that's going to be a major, major setback for the globalists. So with that much motive, yeah, they'll kill one of their own just so they can wave the bloody shirt.
It's just amazing how much the media will hold back from us. Like, they won't even mention Anna Lind. You can't get her name on TV.
No, I mean, the corporate media's job is to feed us only that information that will lead us to conclude of our own free will what we're supposed to conclude, what the propaganda is designed to produce. And remember, they just passed a law legalizing U.S. government propaganda against the American people. It used to be banned. They were doing it anyway. Now they're openly admitting it. Hi, we're the U.S. government. We're going to lie to you about everything. And if you're a loyal American, you will believe us.
The only good thing about living in a dictatorship is at least you know you're living in a dictatorship. You know not to trust anything you read or hear.
Well, you know the old saying.
In our country, people
are waking up to the fact this is a dictatorship. I mean, the Democrats saw how their votes didn't matter for Bernie Sanders. Now the GOP is going to basically flip the bird at Republican voters. We all know it's become a dictatorship. We have been disenfranchised from a government that's supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, and everybody knows it. And that's actually going to make things a lot harder for the dictatorship. They were trying to hide that. Because remember, the very best slaves are ones who are convinced that they're free.
You're right about that, but eventually people have got to catch on. They've got to the point where we do something about it rather than discuss it or wait for things to collapse.
Well, let me wade in on this. I think most people have woken up to the fact that something has gone very, very wrong with this government and economy. By doing something about it, I am still committed to finding a way towards a peaceful revolution. I do not want to see bloody fighting in the streets of the United States, because if there is one thing the U.S. federal government does know how to do very well, it's kill people. And when you have a violent revolution, all too often the wrong people get killed and crippled in these things. And I understand one may be coming. I'm hearing it from so many different sources, but I am still committed to finding a Gandhi-esque way of trying to bring this to a peaceful resolution.
Well, it could be a dissolution like the Soviet Union went through.
That's really what I'm aiming toward. We know this government and economic system are in the process of self-destructing. The smartest thing that we can do is not give them any excuse to declare a national emergency and martial law and say, oh, we're doing this for the safety of the American people, shred what's left of the Constitution and establish this new tyranny. And that's why I keep saying, stay calm, you know, get a soft drink and some popcorn and watch the show, because I do feel that ultimately the fate of the U.S. federal government matches that of the former Soviet Union, and it's going to collapse of its own rot. We're going to have about 4 months where we're really going to have to be taking care of each other to get through these hard times, because we're talking about a system that is mandating our dependency on it to keep us enslaved. Remember what I said the other day about the Declaration of Independence. We're back in that same forced dependence control mechanism that the American colonists were back in the 1770s. But it is going to come on down, and we're going to have to take care of each other, and then we'll start a new government in this land. I think we ought to go back to the original core Constitution and everything up to the 13th Amendment, and add a new amendment after that. No more private central banks ever, 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 ever again.
I agree, and because you can't, it's very hard to beat people who can create money out of thin air. It's very difficult.
Well,
like that.
Yeah, but remember, when they create money out of thin air, eventually the system destroys itself. Nobody had to go into the Central Bank of Zimbabwe and tear it down. They simply printed themselves into complete and utter worthlessness.
Well, I hope you're right, but I have a feeling what it's going to end up being is kind of like what happened in Tunisia when they had that spontaneous uprising. Remember when that street vendor was slapped by a police officer, and all of a sudden just the country was just ready for one thing to happen, and that was the one trigger.
We saw the same thing in Romania. Same thing in Romania. A riot at a sporting event turns into an impromptu political rally, and 2 weeks later Ceausescu's machine gunned to death on Romanian national television. It could happen just that fast here.
It'll be so fast, the globalists won't have time to even plan for it. They won't have. I know they've spent a lot of our money on contingency plans, but it's going to be so fast they won't even have time to even communicate those.
Well, as near as I can tell, the riots going on in France caught them by surprise. Apparently, there is another civil disorder issue going on in London that the media is absolutely not reporting about in the borough of Barker, I think it is. And there are police out there with their armor and the tear gas and everything. There's something going on, and it could be the start of the spread of the French contagion all across Europe, because this push to create a single global government has created a political climate in which we could see a single global revolution of the people of every nation throwing out their oligarchs all at the same time.
One fear I do have is I see a lot of push in the media towards royal families, and I know that they prop those up in response to if our elected system falls. That might be an alternative. People might turn to an older system for some peace.
Well, I don't agree with that.
I hope Europe doesn't fall for that.
Well, I don't agree with that because, first of all, multi-generational rulers tend to decline in quality, to put it delicately. I mean, there's one good thing about a king. He's stuck with the job. You know, he can't just hold things off and let his successor take things over here. But again, I believe that the only legitimate form of governance for any nation and its people is self-governance. And the Founding Fathers put chains on that central government to keep them the servant of the people, and they've managed to break free from those chains. They're simply not complying with that contract with America, the Constitution, and people are getting more and more angry about it. Taxes are going up, Obamacare premiums are going up, cost of food and fuel is going up, wages and salaries are being driven down, and our children are being grabbed for more wars of conquest in a vain effort to make it all work somehow.
The contract with America has been turned to a contract on America.
I like that. That's a good phrase. That's a good saying.
We're running out of money, Mike. We can't afford all this stuff.
Well,
can't afford it.
The problem is here in the United States, down in Venezuela, all across Europe, the rich aren't running out of money because, as you say, they're simply creating more money for themselves. Ordinary people are running out of money, and you can't have a functioning, working economy when all the wealth is in the pockets of just a few people at the very top. They've got amazing lives. I mean, there was this photo essay that was done about Venezuela showing how hard it is for the Venezuelan people and then contrasting it with these absolute luxurious lifestyles of the political and economic elites down there. And it does remind one of pre-revolutionary France. The way the royalty and the nobility were living and treating themselves and versus the people in the street. We could see a revolution start in Venezuela.
And catch and spread like wildfire.
Absolutely. It could go global because the entire globe is being oppressed by these money junkies and their lackeys in the various governments. And, yeah, when it starts in one country, it is going to spread. It's going to be a contagion all over the globe.
Well, I keep my fingers crossed.
Mine
Thanks,
too.
Mike, for everything you do.
All right, thank you very much, Scott. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up on a commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking more about the political campaign. For some reason, we're seeing all of these articles hitting Bernie Sanders, even though ostensibly he's not the nominee. But they're still in attack mode. More when we get back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, at this point, Hillary has been anointed the Democratic nominee, and you would think at this point they'd be backing off on Bernie Sanders. But all of a sudden, we're seeing all this media come on out trying to get him to just quit the race completely. Sanders is saying he's going to stay in it till the convention. He's sort of gambling that the FBI and Department of Justice might actually do their job. And no, I don't think they are. My nickel is on judicial watch. And we could have a whistleblower come out of left field that could just blow this whole email server spying scandal wide open and save this country. But they want Bernie Sanders out. Voice of America came on out with a report saying that Bernie Sanders doesn't believe in democracy. There was another story out there about how Bernie Sanders remaining in the race was just costing the American taxpayer, needless amounts of money for his Secret Service protection. So something is definitely going on there. Now, as you know, Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, has left. Some are saying he resigned. Others are saying Trump did the "you're fired" thing on him. And apparently, according to what I'm hearing, the bone of contention, if you will, was that Corey was telling Trump to back off on the Clinton scandals, to back off on how Hillary treated Bill Clinton's sexual assault victims, which didn't sound like good advice to me and apparently did not sound like good advice to Donald Trump. Well, Michelle Fields is out there gloating over the fact that Corey Lewandowski is gone, and, he beat me up, and he, tore the tags off my couch cushions, and he stole socks from my dryer, and the rest of it. And I think her celebration is a little premature. I mean, given that she is pro-Hillary, because if, in fact, Roger Stone becomes the new campaign manager, they're going to uncork on Hillary. And we're already seeing a story out of TargetLiberty.com about Trump is going into major new attack mode against Hillary Clinton. And let's be honest, he has got a lot of facts to work with. And I reprised to my main page The Epic of Clinton's Mess, which is a comprehensive but by no means complete listing of all the stuff they've done. The Clinton body count. And finally, that question that I am going to continue to ask, that nobody in the corporate media or government will touch, even to ridicule the suggestion. Was Hillary Clinton repeating the 1996 Chinagate scandal, selling U.S. secrets for donations? So Trump has a lot of material to work with, and I invite you to grab those articles and send them out to your social media. Now, Judge Jeanine had a video where basically she has come to the conclusion that Hillary Clinton is blackmailing Barack Obama over that private email server. And she makes some very, very good points. She goes back to Hillary Clinton stating, "I will not be indicted. This is nothing. It's going to go away." And Jeanine says, how does Hillary know that, given that Hillary refused to talk to the Inspector General, still has not talked to the FBI? How can Hillary be that sure? Then Judge Jeanine goes on to Barack Obama, who was out there defending Hillary and saying, well, there's classified and then there's classified, and I'm sure that national security wasn't compromised. Now, given that Obama has stated publicly that he has not talked to the FBI or the Department of Justice about this case, which would be inappropriate, would be obstruction of justice, how does Obama know national security wasn't compromised? There's no way he can know that. It could have been compromised in ways that nobody has detected yet. He's trying to assert a negative, and anybody who's studied logic is going to tell you that is actually an impossibility. We got to take a break for more commercials. More about this when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking about this video that Judge Jeanine did. It's on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. And she's making some very valid points in there. You've got Hillary Clinton saying that she's sure there won't be any indictments and there's no big deal. And how can Hillary Clinton know? When Hillary refused to talk to the Inspector General, has not talked to the FBI, then you have on the other side Obama, who is trying to defend her by saying that he's sure that there's nothing there. At the same time, he's saying he has not discussed this matter with the Attorney General or the FBI because that would be obstruction of justice. And then a week later, he comes on out endorsing Hillary Clinton. And Judge Jeanine is reminding us all that in the dumps of Hillary Clinton's email from her private server, she sent several emails directly to Barack Obama, and he replied directly to at least 2 of them using Hillary Clinton's private email server. So Obama knew what was going on and did nothing about it. And Judge Jeanine is now concluding that Hillary Clinton is blackmailing Barack Obama by saying that if there is an indictment and any kind of a trial, the first witness she's going to call is going to be Barack Obama himself. Remember, the very best conspiracies are the ones that force even your own worst enemy to try and protect you out of their own self-interest. And don't forget, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton have all the dirt on this government going back a quarter of a century. They know where all the dead bodies are buried. They know how they got to be dead bodies. They're literally in a position to be able to blackmail the entire United States government to get Hillary the White House. And Judge Jeanine's video is further confirmation of what I've been hearing through other sources, that Hillary is in fact threatening the entire government. That if she doesn't get the White House, she will go public on all these scandals and ruin a lot of careers, possibly bring the government itself crashing down. Let's grab some phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. If Bill Clinton's still in her bed, it might have his head in her bed, like a horse head.
Ooh, there's an image.
Hey, Mike, Trump needs to focus and he needs to send his messengers to talk about Bill Clinton and his sexual escapades and Hillary Clinton saying it's a right-wing conspiracy while Trump talks about the economy, Benghazi, and the wars. The economy is essential because people are feeling that pinch where they're saying everything's okay, Obama, which endorsed Hillary, but people, not just here, but in all of the EU, is feeling the pinch, and you got to focus on the economy. That is her Achilles heel, is the economy and the wars that she supported.
Well, yeah, I mean, looking at the speeches that are coming out right now, I mean, Hillary's gone into attack mode, insisting that Trump is going to drive down wages and salaries, and came out with a talking point that Donald Trump will bankrupt the United States the way he bankrupted his casinos, forgetting that it was the economic downturn that actually brought Trump's casinos into trouble. People didn't have money to gamble with. But Hillary understands that's her weakness, and that's why she's going into attack mode on it.
Yeah, because everybody needs to re-understand this. The EU is collectivist. The United States is collectivist. It's all one group. It's a small 0.1% people controlling the flow of money, the printing of money, the wars, all of that. And they're losing control because of the rise of nationalism, not just here, but in the EU. If you just do any basic research for 5 minutes, you'll figure that out. And that's all you need to know, because that's what's happening.
Well, I wouldn't call them collectivist. I think it's more accurate to say they're fascistic. The idea that if you make money, you get to keep it, and if you lose money, you make the people cover the losses. And we've seen that pattern repeated here in the United States with all these bailouts. We're seeing it all across Europe. It's not collectivist, it's fascistic. And fascism serves the very rich and the very powerful at the expense of everybody else. They are losing control of this system because it's all based on private central banking, which is an inherently unstable system by virtue of the fact that, by design, it creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. And they are losing control of it. We're going to be in Zimbabwe territory before too much longer.
And it's just a shame the majority of people who are for Hillary
I don't know that they are. I don't know how many people are for Hillary. They're rigging the polls. They're rigging the elections. We know the media is on board saying whatever it's going to take to say to convince us Hillary Clinton is the winner. They're not reporting on these mile-long lines of people trying to get into Donald Trump's rallies. They're absolutely desperate to prove that they can still control the minds of America because that's really what they sell. And if it doesn't work, they're going to have to give up those cushy $1 million paychecks that are all paid.
By the way, that guy who tried to grab the officer's gun at the Trump rally,
yes,
he's like overstayed his visa, and he's supposed to be from Britain. What a coincidence!
Yeah,
Britain?
He's an illegal immigrant
From Britain.
Yeah, and
what a coincidence!
Well, and that's something else the media didn't report on: the fact that the guy who wanted to shoot Donald Trump was an illegal immigrant. And they're not talking about that at all.
Because it doesn't fit their agenda.
That's right. It doesn't fit the agenda.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, you were talking about Curry Lewandowski, why he stepped down, and Roger Stone. I think Stone has actually been the chief advisor since he supposedly stepped down early in the campaign. I think that was to make it easier for Stone to put the message. I read the book that he wrote about the Bushes, about the Bush crime family. I didn't read the one yet about Mrs. Slick Willie and Bill Clinton, but I understand that's a doozy, too, and these two families are connected. And I hope you're right. I hope he's going to completely take over this campaign now, and they will dive bomb Hillary into this total destruction if he does. Because I don't have any confidence also that they're going to indict. I think this guy's the head of the FBI? He's one tall pile of you-know-what.
Yeah,
okay?
I would agree with you. Well, that's the FBI's corporate culture. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
The Bushes and the Clintons are very tightly tied together. They were both tangled up in Iran-Contra, cocaine, and gun running. And basically they represent two dynastic ruling families in the United States handing the throne off between themselves back and forth to try and preserve the illusion that we are a democracy. But we're all seeing through that now. And, Obama was the ringer. Hillary was supposed to win in 2008, and then they were going to queue up Jeb Bush to come in after Hillary stepped down. But, Obama did prove an outsider can get in back in 2008. And we need to keep that in mind when we talk about Donald Trump.
And I also think that you're going to see that about the blackmailing of Obama. You're right. I think the whole government is being blackmailed. And I think a lot of it has to do with not just Benghazi, but the entire Libyan affair, the entire gun running through Turkey into Syria, the poison gas that I believe the CIA ran into to make it look like Assad did it. It's all, not only she, Obama, and I believe certain Republicans like Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and a few others, this guy Mike Rogers, I believe they're tied into this too. This is what I think is really going on. This is why you saw that Trey Gowdy was so nice to Mrs. Slick there during the hearings that he didn't really go after her because they're all on shaky feet. But I think with Stone doing the advising and taking over that campaign, I think Trump is going to destroy this woman. I think he's going to
I certainly hope to see it. I certainly hope to see it here. Now, there's two other factors you need to keep in mind. One of the reasons the federal government is tiptoeing around Hillary Clinton is because if I am correct about what was really going on with that weak security private server and donations to the Clinton Foundation, exposure of a scandal that large could bring the entire government down. They all want to protect their phony baloney jobs and their sky-high paychecks and the perks and all the rest of it. So, again, the best conspiracy is one that has your worst enemy working to protect you, and Hillary has come up with that. The other issue we all need to keep in mind, okay, is if Hillary Clinton is elected president, she will be under the control of every foreign power that knows what she's really been doing. She is open, wide open, to blackmail on all of these various issues. Donald Trump, I mean, they've had all these people trying to find dirt on him, and so far all they can find is that he hurt the feelings of the illegal immigrants. And if he's president, he's going to do what he thinks is good for this country. He's not going to be answering late-night phone calls, you know, from somebody saying, you know, give us more money or we'll tell the world who really did 9/11.
You know what I'm also hoping?
What?
I'm hoping that Putin comes through. You know, he's got all the information. I'm hoping that he finally comes through and lets them all out, emails. Of course, maybe he wants her in there because he can be easier for him to, to blackmail the government. But I think Putin is a better man than that. I think Putin is a guy who really got honor, and I think he'd actually like to see a guy like Trump in there.
Well, of course he wants Trump in there. You know, Putin already knows that if Hillary Clinton is elected, war between the U.S. and Russia is an inevitability. They may even start it before the election or before Trump can take the White House just to stick him with it. Donald Trump is already on record saying he wants to go back to being friends with China, wants to go back to being friends with Russia, wants to do trade, buy back and forth, peace through commerce. That's Donald Trump's stated agenda, and that fits in perfectly with what Putin wants. Putin wants to make deals. Hillary wants to make war.
But you don't think he figured that he's got Hillary on a string and that she couldn't do anything because of what Putin has? And I'm sure they got everything. I mean, the KGB, even when they were a Soviet KGB, the FSB now has always been one of the best intelligence agencies in the world, and they have to have everything. They really do.
Well, he would probably have to temper that with the reaction. If Hillary becomes president, we're going to be in a new Cold War, and Putin is not going to be able to present this information anywhere where anybody's going to see it or believe it. And so, and that would, he could very well trigger an attack by Hillary just to protect herself. She might start a nuclear war.
Well, the first bomb hopefully would go right on the White House then, the first nuke.
Well,
she did that.
You know, I'd kind of like to see the place someday, even though there's very little of the original. And the government has all their bunkers all over the place. They got Mount Weather. They reactivated the Greenbrier. So hitting Washington, D.C. wouldn't really do much of anything except blow up a lot of really world-class museums.
Well, you got a point there, I guess. But anyway, but hopefully he's going to let it out before. Hopefully it will be the coup de grace on her, because I'm sure he's got everything he needs on this woman, you know? Because, like I said, the KGB and then now the FSB, it's some of the finest intelligence agencies in the world. And right now, Russia is a very, they've got people that love their country working for them now. Not like these clowns like a Coney with the FBI who just wants to keep his job and couldn't care less about justice, other than shooting ranchers there and ambushes there in Oregon.
Yeah,
that's about the only thing they're good for. They can't.
Well, there's another factor. There's another factor, and it goes back to what I said about how the corporate media won't even address the issue of Hillary potentially selling secrets through that email server of hers. What Putin could have absolute ironclad evidence that Hillary Clinton is guilty. The American corporate media would never, ever dare touch it. They are that controlled by corporate and political interests. There's absolutely no honest reporting left in the corporate media.
Yeah, but there's people that would let it out. I mean, including you, Alex Jones, a few others. I mean, John D. Wells. You'd be surprised that this stuff gets out. If they couldn't just keep it. Breitbart too. Breitbart would let it out. And Breitbart is like they're borderline, mainstream media and offensive media.
Well,
they would let it out.
Well, I certainly would. I mean, anonymity is guaranteed. If you've got the evidence that, Hillary sold out her country, send it on in and I will make it public. All right, well, Mark, listen, thank you. I'm going to let you go. The phone lines are filling up here, and we're going to switch to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Again, about Hillary, and I absolutely agree with everybody from the very beginning. Obama and Judge Jeanine was never going to allow the email thing to come out because it would absolutely make him as culpable, if for nothing else, from incompetence, but maybe more. But he would go down too. However, the way to get her, I think, is if you separate her protector, which is the executive the FBI, the CIA, all the people, the Justice Department, who are acting under Obama's bidding to protect her. And that's the Clinton Foundation. Obama should not be in any way, susceptible to being taken down by the Clinton Foundation. And maybe without her protector, maybe we can get her that way.
I don't think Hillary has just one protector. Again, because she's in a position to blackmail the entire government. If Obama got disconnected from the system, there are others who are going to step on in and protect Hillary Clinton, not because they love Hillary Clinton, but because they want to go on being in the government and, being in the Congress and having hot and cold running interns to play with and all this other stuff that's been going on.
Yeah, but Mike, it's pretty clear that Obama is doing everything he can to halt the investigation or making sure it goes nowhere.
Well, if anybody's got factual information confirming that, a memo, something in writing under his signature, that's obstruction of justice and that's an impeachable offense.
Well, yeah, but it maybe he's more open to it if there was a scandal that he wasn't involved with, that we can bring her down. Thus, the Clinton Foundation. But anyways, let's hope that somebody gets her, because she is a freaking disaster.
She will set the world on fire, and I think if she steals the White House, it's not going to be enough for her. When you hear her giving speeches about, America's place in the world, she wants to be, when they get the New World Order, she wants to be the first empress.
I agree. Absolutely.
All right, well, listen.
Mike, one more question.
Real quick.
Question about the guy. What's the latest on the guy who was arrested, or who turned himself in Santa Monica on that Orlando thing?
Well, the FBI took over the investigation, and nothing else is being allowed out about it. It's gone into a black hole. It's gone into room 101. We got to let you go here. Got to take a commercial break. Got another caller waiting as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. Etheric Dave, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. You were talking about the collapse, and hopefully we will have a Soviet Union-type collapse. But one way or the other, this government is going down with this corrupt system, and we will be on our own to take care of ourselves. And one of the things we're going to need to take care of is a way to communicate with one another, because we certainly cannot trust this grid. This government has been engaging in divide and conquer, and the last thing they're going to want while they're trying to fight a revolution or whatever is us talking to each other. To that end, this weekend is Amateur Radio Field Day. Every club in the United States is putting on their off-grid stations out there and exhibiting them to the public. So just go to your search engine and look for Field Day in your local clubs and go meet those people. Even if you don't want to get involved in the hobby yourself, it would be a good idea to know whose door you need to knock on to find out what the heck is going on when we don't have any more internet or cell phones or anything like that, when we're in utter collapse. And that's really all I got. Good to be here, though.
Well, thank you very much. And, of course, anybody who's ever been involved in radio or amateur radio understands when natural disasters hit and the regular corporate communication systems fail, the amateur radio operators are generally the only lines of communication in and out of an area. And if you don't want to have a license to broadcast, shortwave radios that cover the ham bands are very easy to get, and you should have one in your survival kit, one that supports upper and lower sideband, so that you can hear more of these broadcasts. The AM-only ones are very, very limited, so that's a feature you need to look for. Upper and lower sidebands, or single sideband, SSB. And just have it as a receiver, and you can tune around and find out what's really going on. And it is a very powerful means of communication. In the days before the Internet, that was a major form of communication that was outside the government's control. The only thing they could try and do was, jam communications with their military jammers, but they can't cover the entire country all at once.
And they can't cover all the bands at once, too. And we have lots of local VHF and UHF stuff. So the people in the clubs will know the scanner frequencies that you can plug into. A lot of these people are first responders as well. So when you have things like Orlando going on, you're going to know people that are a little bit more in the know of what's going on with the local stuff. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. Hey, appreciate all you're doing, Mike. Stay safe, stay free, and all the rest, and I'll let you go.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, and it is good advice. And, yeah, I'm old enough to remember in the days before the Internet here, and I was very big into radio. I actually built my first crystal set around a Quaker oatmeal box. I actually still have that as a decoration. And then I'm old enough to remember the joys of Heathkit, and I built a shortwave radio from Heathkit that I had for a lot of years. And now, of course, I have some more modern equipment here. But these days, getting a ham radio license is a lot easier. They have given up the requirement for Morse code, although it's still a good thing to know. So, yeah, if you're in need of a new hobby, ham radio is a good one to be getting into right now. Got to take a break for our top-of-the-hour station identification, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, the hacker who is calling himself Guccifer 2.0 has kept his word and dumped a whole new set of files taken from the Democratic National Committee's computer system. There's a lot of interesting information in there. And it's a huge number of documents. I got my copy earlier today. It's all about position papers. It includes the emails about how the TV networks were cooperating with the Hillary campaign to swing the election to her, including that ridiculous announcement that she had already won the nomination before the California primary was even held, which turned out to be completely bogus. Remember, you cannot, under DNC rules, you cannot count the superdelegate votes until they actually vote, for one thing. Now, the fact that Guccifer has put out this information proves two things. One, Hillary's computers are not secure. And 2, it puts the lie to the claim that Russia was behind this break-in to the Democratic computers. Remember, we had NATO was out there saying, well, this is an attack by Russia on the United States, and we should just nuke them right now. The guy isn't Russian. Now, buried in these reports are some interesting information about the luxurious lifestyle that Hillary enjoys. And they found the documents regarding her speeches, all these speeches that we're told are private and we can't know what they are. It's not just the speaking fee, which is a standard $225,000. But on top of that money, Hillary requires a chartered round-trip private jet, a Gulfstream 450 or larger, can seat 19 passengers or sleep up to 6. The plane costs $40 million. I don't know what it costs to charter it. Clinton's contract for a speech also stipulated that the speech host had to pay for separate first-class airfare for 3 of her aides, who apparently were not allowed on the chartered plane. Clinton had to be guaranteed a presidential suite with 3 adjoining or contiguous rooms for her travel aides and 2 extra rooms for the advanced staff. The host was also responsible for the Clinton travel party's ground transportation, meals, and phone charges and cell phone costs. She's just raking that stuff in. It's amazing here. All right, let's grab a phone call. James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I've actually been having you on all this time. It's actually Lord Aloysius de Rothschild, and I'm summering on Epstein Island. But anyway, based on the premise that the Orlando shooting was a false flag in the sense that nobody got hurt, a terrorist goes into a bar, and the bartender says, "What do you want?" He says, "Shots for everybody."
That's terrible. That is terrible. That is terrible.
I was trying to think of things that we will all need to know soon, and this is an original. What's the ideal greeting for a Muslim psychiatrist?
I don't know. What is the ideal greeting for a Muslim psychiatrist?
Asylum alaikum.
I thought you were going to say Aloha Snack Bar.
Yeah, Aloha Snack Bar, too. That works.
I'm going to get nasty emails from Muslims for these two.
You have to be inclusive. Actually, I told that to a Muslim psychiatrist, and he laughed like it was the funniest thing he ever heard. But anyway, that's all I got for you, and just figured a little humor might.
Always appreciated. Always appreciated. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, over in New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio, who is a top supporter of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, is dealing with his own scandals right now. Apparently this morning, federal authorities have made arrests which resulted from an investigation into de Blasio's fundraising operation. Something was crooked there. And 4 New York Police Department officials were arrested along with Jeremy Reichberg, a politically associated friend of de Blasio, who was caught bribing police with extravagant gifts. So the system is basically dirty from top to bottom. It's amazing. Hillary Clinton is out there screaming that Donald Trump is radicalizing Republicans. He's taking obedient Republicans who will do what they're told by their leaders, and he's turning them into these radicals who actually want to pick the candidates for themselves. What an absurd idea. Well, I mean, Hillary is radicalizing Democrats in the exact same way. You know, forget the people who wanted Bernie Sanders. We're just going to steal this election. It's just out there. Now, Rush Limbaugh, and I sort of have a love-hate relationship with him. I used to be a regular listener back when he was when Bill Clinton was president, and he had a lot of good things to say. Then George Bush got into the White House, and Rush Limbaugh was basically always his enabler and protector. And I understand he's a Republican, okay, and he believes loyalty to Republican leaders and politicians. I'm a Republican myself, but only to the principles. If there's a Republican politician who is doing bad, they are grist for my mill. I'm not going to shut up just because I'm supposedly in the same party with them. Although the modern GOP has drifted so far away from the original principles of the Republican Party. That's why I call myself a paleocon as opposed to the neocons. But Rush Limbaugh actually came out with an absolutely brilliant question. The GOP has announced they have a 100-day plan to take out GOP frontrunner Donald Trump. But they haven't come out saying they have a 100-day plan to beat Hillary Clinton. And it underscores the reality. The GOP party leadership is so afraid of Donald Trump, they're going to be willing to give that White House to Hillary Clinton, a Democrat, just to keep Trump from spoiling their little fascist economic dictatorship party. And I want to take a moment to welcome our on-air affiliates back to the feed here. We're talking still about politics, a lot of stuff to cover today here. So we have all of these GOP establishment leaders, and they basically say they have a plan to stop Trump forever. They're simply going to change the rules, tell the GOP voters what you want doesn't matter any longer. We want Trump out. We're going to put somebody else in. And I can't believe they're still talking about Ted Cruz. And Hillary would love Ted Cruz to be the GOP nominee. Because once the GOP has committed to Ted Cruz, she's the president. Because Ted Cruz's supporters and the GOP leadership may ignore the fact that Ted Cruz is not constitutionally eligible to serve as president or vice president, but Hillary Clinton and her lawyers will go right to the Supreme Court. And I think if you are a Republican voter, you should be as furious with the party apparatchiks as Democratic supporters of Bernie Sanders. All right, we're going to take... oh, no, wait, that's not a phone call here. Now, as you know, there was that individual who tried to grab a security officer's gun at a Trump rally and shoot him. And as it turns out, this guy's an illegal immigrant. That's a fact that's not really being covered in the news coverage about this. And what's really kind of interesting here, alarming if you will, I've commented on it before. There's all this talk about assassinating Donald Trump, all on social media. Now's our chance to get him. He's in Dallas. Let's take him out like we took out Kennedy. And the corporate media isn't giving it a lot of coverage because, first of all, it does make the issue of illegal immigrants seem legitimate. And, of course, it's going to build sympathy for Donald Trump in his position regarding his wall with Mexico. Now, Hillary Clinton had a little bit of a run-in. Supposedly, when she was over in Las Vegas, a woman in the audience threw a shoe at her, missed by a wide margin. Either the woman who threw the shoe is a lousy, lousy aim, or this was a staged stunt to try and build sympathy for Hillary to counter what was going on down there where the man who tried to shoot Donald Trump. So, now then, getting on to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Syria has sent a request to the United Nations Security Council, actually it's a demand, that they start enforcing the laws regarding chemical weapons and prevent terrorists from obtaining these weapons of mass destruction. And it's not too subtle a dig, because this is in response to that last chemical weapons attack on Syrian soldiers by these U.S.-backed terrorists. How are they getting these chemical weapons? We're not talking chlorine bombs. We're talking about weaponized compounds. Now, up in Europe, the commander of U.S. troops in Europe for NATO is out there saying that we need to bring back the Schengen open borders only for the military, because NATO has to have the ability to simply drive across European borders, to counter Russian aggression. Now, I see a lot of photos and videos of military swarming all over Europe. None of them are painted in Russian colors or sigils. It's all U.S. armor and weapons. It's all British armor and weapons. It's all NATO. NATO's the only one who's acting aggressively in the region. And it's beginning to generate a backlash. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is saying it's time for Europe to boost dialogue with Russia and prevent a new Cold War. And he is probably going to find himself on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list for that, because obviously the U.S. wants a war with Russia. Could be hot, could be cold. Because our government is longing for the good old days in the 1950s and that Cold War with Russia, by always screaming commies at us. They could take our money away and put them into weapons that hardly worked and were never used. Keep us controlled, keep us afraid, keep us obedient. With the fall of the Soviet Union, they lost that. They want to get that back. They want to live again in that America where all they have to do is shout Russian at us and we'll throw a snappy salute, throw our money at them, fling our babies into battle. I don't think they're going to get it, because we've been through it before. Fool me once, and so forth. German human rights activists have sent an open letter to Chancellor Angela Merkel saying it's time for Germany to improve ties with Russia. Remember, these people in Europe, the world wars are a very real presence. As you travel around Europe, you still see the scars. In France, you can still see the scars of the trenches from trench warfare. As you travel across Europe, you still see buildings still damaged, still waiting for somebody to repair them. In some of the cities, there are entire blocks that are simply walled off, that haven't been touched since the end of the war because there's unexploded munitions there. World war is a very real presence for the people of Europe. For Americans, it's an abstraction. We haven't had a war on our own soil since the Civil War. They don't want to be in another one. They know if there's a new world war, it's going to be fought on their front lawns. They don't want to have that. Meanwhile, as if trying to goad war with Russia wasn't enough, we're seeing all of a sudden, especially since Orlando, they're cranking up the anti-Islam propaganda. And I saw this story out there, and this is really a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement. Islamic State beheads 4-year-old girl, then forces her mother to soak hands in dead daughter's blood, and then kill a puppy. Actually, I had added that last part itself. And who's it coming from? Pamela Geller. It's another one of these Pamela Geller pieces of propaganda for which there is absolutely no support. And the problem is, corporate media and even, sadly, some independent media will quote the article without mentioning that the source is Pamela Geller. Just like they were carrying that latest video about terrorists are coming to blow up Times Square without mentioning that it's coming from Rita Katz's Site Intelligence Group, which has been caught faking videos many, many times before. And they're even dragging in the tabloids to bash Russia. This is coming out of The Sun, which nobody has any respect for. And they had a headline story, Russia to conquer the moon and station a squad of cosmonauts in permanent lunar outpost. Now, Russia may be looking at a base on the moon, so is NASA. But the spin of the article is they're going to stand up on the moon and threaten to drop bombs on us. Meanwhile, a story came out of offguardian.org, which is kind of a watchdog on the British corporate media, about how the wheels finally came off the Guardian's Russophobia. And they're commenting about this story that the Guardian came out with, saying that the people who caused the ruckus at the sporting event, I think it was soccer, and they're parts of the Russian uniformed services. And, of course, immediately the first thing I thought about is, look at those beards. Russia's uniformed military do not allow beards. And apparently the Guardian, when pressed, came on out and said intelligence sources, but when they tried to follow that, basically it came down to they were searching social media for anybody saying Russians are at this sporting event. Social media is incredibly unreliable. Everybody's propagandizing it. Everybody exaggerates on it. And it finally came down. They said, well, actually, there is no proof that any Russian military were involved in this ruckus anyway, but it just made sense. It had to be them. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Getting back to the war zone, I've been reading reports about an explosion in a training camp in Jordan on the Syrian border. They were obviously training the Takfiris to go over the border into Syria. And it killed 7 Jordanian soldiers and injured 100 odd others. And so they've now decided to close the border and stop anybody moving across that border. And I think this demonstrates the inadvisability of any of these nations surrounding Syria in supporting the American supported terrorists, because they're going to get blowback.
Well, they're going to get blowback. See, the thing is, the cover-up that the U.S. was trying to play of telling everybody that they're in Syria to get those bad old terrorists, and then we find out the U.S. was actually arming and supplying those terrorists as proxies against Bashar al-Assad. And now everybody knows that's what's going on. And the U.S. is stuck trying to bolster this propaganda, even in the face of people who know that it's just an absolute joke. And, yeah, it's going to change the political dimensions all across the Middle East, because everybody's saying, boy, at this point, we can't tell who the bad guys are without a scorecard.
Yep, and Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition in Britain, was on the TV asking questions of one of the Remain MPs on the Conservative side.
Yes.
And he actually pressed this Conservative to admit that if we remain in Europe, there is no way to stop millions of these refugees coming over the border into Britain. And I think Jeremy Corbyn quoted about 5 million. And there would be no way to stop them because the border would be wide open on the edicts that the EU commissioners have already issued. So, this was a prime example of how they're hiding the real issues unless somebody presses them really hard. And we need to press this Remain campaign because it's nothing but fear-mongering. And then we've now seen a report by a Norwegian, ex-Norwegian MP who said that, you know, Brexit, they have nothing to fear because of this new proposal, this new Nordic trading bloc, which includes Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Britain. If they get out,
and there's that other trading bloc with Russia and Central Asia who are saying they're going to do business with Great Britain without the EU. And, you know, it's going to be the EU is going to steal this election is really what it's going to come down to, or Parliament will simply ignore the will of the people, and that could trigger a revolt. Got to let you go here, John. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about what's going on in all these zones of confrontation, potential war all over the planet here. Story coming out of Sputnik News. Saber rattling versus common sense. NATO drills in Poland remarkably foolish. And this is according to John Mearsheimer, a professor, a political science professor at the University of Chicago. And he's absolutely right. Nobody needs to be holding military drills on the border with Russia other than to provoke Russia. They could be having the drills in all kinds of places where it's obvious it's just a drill. But they're pouring ships into the Black Sea. They're gathering on Poland. They're massing at the borders. They're telegraphing what they're doing. Now, China is threatening to leave the United Nations Sea Convention if The Hague invalidates China's maritime claims. And China has gone back to the Cairo Convention. They've gone back to older Chinese texts showing that these waters have always been considered Chinese territorial waters. And all these other places, the Philippines and Vietnam, that are trying to carve them off. If you look at a map of all these overlapping claims, the South China Sea isn't that far from China. It's just as close to China as it is to Vietnam as it is to the Philippines. But everybody wants to carve it up for the oil and certainly for the fishing rights, although why anybody would be eating fish out of the Pacific post-Fukushima is a mystery to me. But they're rattling the sabers over there. Let's talk about the economy here. The BRICS banks are going to issue bonds in the currency of their members, bypassing the dollar completely. And that's why the U.S. is trying to take down Brazil, trying to start a war with Russia, starting to try and start a war with China. It's all about protecting the monopoly of the U.S. Federal Reserve note in global trade and banking. And they're willing to risk incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper everybody has to use for the next 100 years. And I'll guarantee you one thing. You won't see any of these private central bankers or their family members fighting these battles. Oh, no, no, no. That's what you serfs are for, you plebes, you great unwashed, you slaves. We spend your blood to make our gold. That's the natural order of things. Okay, over in Germany, a court has ruled in favor of the European Central Bank's latest crisis-fighting tool, which is basically replicating what the Federal Reserve is doing, creating money out of thin air and lavishing it on governments and corporations, leaving taxpayers with the risk of one day having to foot the bill, because the ECB runs the same way as the Federal Reserve. All the money it creates out of thin air is considered a loan at interest payable by the people. It's a fascist system. And we're already seeing these so-called loans going to governments that can't be repaid, leaving ordinary people on the hook for basically what comes down to really foolish and reckless decisions. And they're making these foolish and reckless decisions because the alternative is to admit private central banks are inherently unstable. By design, they create more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the debt pulls the entire system down. Now, Russia and Kazakhstan are out there saying that they're ready to offer the European Union as a whole a highway out of the transatlantic trade and investment partnership restrictions. They're basically saying, don't trade with the other members of the TTIP. Come trade with us. We're not going to put a bunch of rules on there to tell you how to live your lives and guarantee unending wealth to ourselves. Here in the United States, the consumer economy continues to decline. The goods economy is sinking, and it's dragging down trucking and railroads with it. The signs are not good. The signs are, in fact, very bad. We're heading into a recession. Now, there's been another hedge fund manager was charged in an insider trading case and was about to make a deal to rat out his fellow inside traders, and he got really, really, really depressed, and he was found dead, and it was instantly declared a suicide by slitting his own throat. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, obviously, Thursday we're coming up on the Brexit vote. Both sides are claiming the polls are favoring their issue, and the backlash over the assassination of Joe Cox is continuing to grow. And it's backflashing on the Remain camp, which has been trying to say that anybody who votes for Brexit is obviously siding with murderers and assassinations and saying Brexit is creating division and resentment. Actually, it's the European Union and the European Central Bank that is creating division and resentment, along with that immigration refugee agenda. That's what's creating the division and resentment. Brexit is the result. It's not the cause, it's a symptom. Now, more and more is coming out about the actual shooting. Remember, the original report that this guy shouted Britain first or some such has already been refuted by the individual who was actually named in the media as saying that he witnessed the killer shout this before he attacked Joe Cox. That's already discredited. Now it has come on out that apparently the individual who shot Joe Cox attended a meeting of white supremacists in Britain arranged by an FBI undercover informant. Are you beginning to see the pattern here? And if you are, you're not alone. Story out of Brassjack TV, the story stinks to high heaven, saying that, yeah, it's very suspicious what happened to Joe Cox. It's suspicious because of the timing. Now, the killer was not known to have had any political opinions at all, not even about the Brexit. And they're talking about this claim that he was shouting Britain first. That's already been discredited. Just before Joe Cox was assassinated, the polls were showing a strong swing towards Leave. And they went through this whole thing about suspending the campaign. This was definitely being politicized from beginning to end. And yes, political interests, money interests will kill people to protect their wealth and power. Now, an ex-Norwegian government minister is out there saying the British actually have nothing to fear leaving the European Union. All of this scaremongering is absolute nonsense, but that's not stopping them from doing that. Soros is already out there saying the Brexit will bring economic crash. Russia will emerge as a global power if we don't keep you in the European Union. Basically, Soros is threatening Britain because Soros has the wealth where he can go on in and do some serious damage to the British economy. And what's going on, of course, with Soros and the globalists is that a positive Brexit vote will trigger a stampede out of the EU. Now, over in the Express, they're reporting that the majority of voters still want the Brexit. The undecideds are coming on down on the side of Leave. Another story coming out of the Express, over 50s overwhelmingly in favor of Brexit, and 77% believe it will see the end of the European Union. Another story out of the Independent. Poll reveals third of Leave voters believe MI5 conspiring with government to stop the Brexit. And what's going on here? Let's see. Story out of the Express again. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev was out there saying basically the EU is the old Soviet Union dressed in Western clothing. It does operate just like it. That unelected EU Commission is a clone of the Politburo. And if anybody's going to recognize a newly resurgent Soviet-style government, it's going to be Mikhail Gorbachev. Derek Hyde is out there saying Cameron is a criminal and a liar. He knows it's impossible to reform the undemocratic European Union. You can't vote those European commissioners out. The European Parliament has no real authority. They can't create laws. They can't repeal laws. They'll debate everything and make a recommendation, but those unelected, unimpeachable EU commissioners make all the decisions. Gorbachev is right. It's the rebirth of the Soviet Union in the heart of Europe. Another story coming out of Liberty Blitzkrieg. It's not just Great Britain. Widespread support for EU referendums are sweeping across Europe. And they're talking about how all these countries are starting to realize that their democracy has become a complete illusion. Just like voters in the U.S. are learning. Now, another story from Global Research up in Canada. Beyond Brexit, favorable opinion of the European Union plunges everywhere, especially France. They're talking the favorable view of the EU is 38% in France, 44% in the United Kingdom. Now, what's really interesting about this is the breakdown by age. Because the people who are supporting Britain staying in the European Union, the people who have a high view of the European Union, are the very young who have never known any life but being part of the European Union. The older population remembers how different life was prior to the EU, and that's why they want to go back. That's the breakdown. Another article coming out of NRC up in the Netherlands talking about how the scaremongering is starting there because the Netherlands is talking about a European Union referendum. And they're already saying the scaremongering is going on. You will die without us. Texas nationalists are now starting to talk about a Texit, looking at the Brexit vote for inspiration. And I wish them luck. For one thing, Texas statehood is not entirely legal. Even the Supreme Court admitted Congress could not simply annex Texas. There are questions about the legality of several states' statehood, including right here in Hawaii. So let's talk about the refugee crisis, because it is impossible to separate the issue of the Brexit from the flood of migrants pouring in. And according to this article that came out of the Express again, unskilled European Union migrants are costing British taxpayers £6.6 billion a year. Remember, as these migrants go through Turkey, Erdogan is keeping the skilled people there to be part of his economy, and the ones that he can't find a use for are the ones being forwarded along to Europe. It's a filtration process. And the people at the end of that line of filters are getting the dregs, as it were. The British migrant numbers are skyrocketing because of foreign students who qualify for an education visa and turn out they don't leave after finishing their studies as they're supposed to. And there's no enforcement going on. The plan is to try and blur all of the populations of Earth together in one gray lump with no idea of a sense of identity on an individual basis to make it easier to control us. Now, Daily Mail's reporting on this British citizen who flies the flag of Great Britain from his car, celebrating Euro 2016, and he was being called a racist by some of these migrants. And he's asking a legitimate question. How is showing pride in my country being racist? I remember when I was a kid, we were supposed to be proud in the United States of America. We were the greatest nation on earth. And now if you get on out there and talk about putting America first like Donald Trump, they're screaming you're being an anti-Semite and you're being a racist and you're being heartless and cold. Boy, talk about the world changing. And one of the most angering situations that people are facing is pressure from their government to basically give up their own traditions, religion, and lifestyle so as not to offend the incoming migrants. Now, over in Europe, they're not as hung up about their bodies as we are here in the United States of America. And there's a lot of clothing optional resorts all over there. We used to have them here in Hawaii, clothing optional beaches, but they were all shut down when a group of concerned moral citizens, all of whom seem to own bathing suit and t-shirt stores, got the Hawaii government to pass a law making nudity on a beach punishable with a $60 fine. But over in Europe, they're a little more relaxed about their bodies. And there is this clothing optional facility, the Family Sport and Naturist Association, Moritzburg. It's in eastern Germany. And they have now been told, because a facility for asylum seekers is being built on the opposite side of the lake where they are, that they're not allowed to go skinny dipping in the lake anymore, because it will offend these people from the other country. Too bad. If they're offended, let them go home. It's one thing to welcome immigrants, legal immigrants, and refugees to your country, and quite another to be told that you have to change your lifestyle to make them comfortable. If they're really uncomfortable here, they can go back home. Teddy Roosevelt came on out and said, you're all welcome here. Just understand, this is the United States of America. It's not any other country. We have one government. We have one flag, we have one language. And if you want to be welcome in our home, you will adjust to us, the hosts. I mean, just for a moment, imagine you're invited to a party. And you are a guest in somebody else's home. And you walk in and you start demanding that your host make changes to things that you're not comfortable with. What's the host going to do? They're going to show you the front door. And they are right to do so. We can all respect other people's cultures. But first and foremost, we have our own. Now, there's been a bit of a propaganda stink that came on out. There was a story where 3 supposed Syrian refugees raped this very young girl at knife point up in Idaho, and the media was coming out today. The prosecutor in the case was saying it's completely wrong. Absolutely did not happen. It's ridiculous. You're bashing the immigrants, and it's absolutely never happened. Then a member of the police department comes on out and admits, yeah, it did happen. There was a sexual assault of this young girl in Twin Falls. The perpetrators were of Iraqi and Sudanese descent, not Syrian. Big, significant difference there. They're trying to protect that agenda. Now, I will grant you a lot of the Muslim bashing does appear to be propaganda, but there are real issues going on, like in Cologne. You can't take 2 cultures and bang them together and not expect friction, especially when both cultures are of the opinion that, hey, we're here, we're going to make this place like what we knew back home. It doesn't work that way. Now, yesterday, supported by the Orlando false flag, the Senate went on a gun-grabbing binge with 4 bills for gun control measures, none of which would have stopped what happened in Orlando, even if you believe the official story. Well, apparently Americans got on their phones and called their senators because all 4 gun control measures were voted down. It's a victory for our Second Amendment rights and our right to protect ourselves. We just posted a video about a real, genuine witness to what was going on who ends her little interview by saying, I wish I had a permit and was carrying concealed. Yeah, so do I. All these mass shootings, staged and otherwise, always hit those gun-free zones because the perpetrators know nobody's going to be able to shoot back. It's time to tear down those gun-free zones and replace them with signs saying, warning to the bad guys. There are guns around here. You guess where they are. And the perpetrators will go someplace else. Kennesaw, Georgia proved that. A few years ago, they actually passed a law mandating every home have a firearm, and crime dropped by 80%. By the way, Kim Kardashian is now out there on her social media and saying how disappointed she is that the Senate voted down these 4 gun control proposals. Poor Kim Kardashian, she's so disappointed. Who the heck cares what Kim Kardashian wants? I mean, she's well known for her well-knownness and taking off her clothes. That's it. And the media is out there trying to cash in on her star power, however much there actually is of that, to say, see, Kim Kardashian is sad because we don't have gun bans in this country. Now, one of the realities that the gun grabbers don't like to admit, the murder rate in the United States has hit a 51-year low, according to the FBI's own numbers. At the same time, legal gun ownership in the United States has increased 141%. And it seems to me that this demonstrates that when there are guns out there in the potential target zones, shooters are going to change their mind. Go do their laundry, mow their lawn, work on their car or something. And Orlando did demonstrate one more time. The police are never there in time to thwart a crime. They show up later, in this case 3 hours, and pose for the news cameras like they're relevant, and they promise justice or revenge, which doesn't do any of the victims any good at all. Now, apparently, let's see. Let me skip on back here. We're coming up on a commercial break here. I was hunting for a specific story. And we'll get to that as soon as we're back from this current commercial break here. So, again, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we all know that there has been a lot of fraud detected in these videos of what happened in Orlando. We know there are crisis actors. There are actually professional actors with screen credits that were being used as witnesses by the news media. And there's been another embarrassment. A gentleman named Angel Colon. And apparently, even a crisis actor has friends. And so there's somebody who actually knew this guy, Angel Colon, called him up on the phone, said, you know, what happened to you? And Angel says, I was shot in the hand. And he was also quoted in the corporate media as having been shot in his hand. And then all of a sudden there's a video of him being interviewed in his hospital bed. And both his hands are in view. There is no sign of an injury, not even a Band-Aid. This was a real rush job. Okay, we're going to take some phone calls. Steve in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How's it going?
Well, it's going pretty good for a Tuesday.
Boy. Well, you know, you were just talking about what was going on in Europe, and similarities are going on here in the United States, especially here in East Texas. This is crazy. Up in Longview, Texas, they've just opened up a Spanish-speaking only police academy to deal with the large influx of Spanish-speaking immigrants. And a lot of the recruits, in fact, 90% of them, who understand, are not even, like, from Texas or the United States. It's just, you know, I can see all kinds of problems. You know, the people that are coming here lately, they like in Europe, they don't want to speak our language. They don't want to assimilate. They don't want to become an American. And
well, I mean, there's that whole La Raza movement. You know, there's this La Raza movement where their agenda, their publicly stated agenda, is to break California off of the United States and return it to being part of Mexico.
It's going to go happen here in Texas. Oh, it's crazy. I couldn't believe it when I saw it on the news this morning. I was like, are you kidding me? You know, what happened to them speaking our language? Why do we have to hire police to speak their language to go into their barrios? And it's just more of the same old that you see in Europe that you see here in the United States.
Yeah, it's this idea that we're going to come in, we're going to get a bunch of free stuff, but we're not going to follow your laws, and we're not going to assimilate to your culture. You know, we're going to bring our culture here, and if you refuse to let us do it, you're just being racist and insensitive, and so forth and so on.
And another thing I see about this, though, is because they're going to have, like, Mexican nationals as police here in this area, they're going to be trolling up there in Longview. You know, they're really bribable, you know? I mean, hey, you know, you got like so-and-so that's dealing cocaine or heroin or marijuana or whatever, and hey, you know, you're my homie from down there, and
okay, well, Steve, I'm sorry to cut you off. We got to take a break for our top of the hour station identification. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's go to the phone. Susie in Arkansas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael. First off, I just want to say I really enjoy your delivery, especially when you change your voice around a little bit to make a point. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yesterday, I hate to regress, but you were talking about something that was going on with Claire, and then you said you scrubbed everything out of the house that broke down to formaldehyde.
Yes.
Did you research all your different products? Is that it that you were using?
Yeah, I basically went out and I found a list of all the chemicals that decompose into formaldehyde, and then I just became this committed label reader. And ever since we started keeping these chemicals out of our house, you know, Claire's been fine.
And what were her symptoms?
In her case, it was serious joint pain, but formaldehyde and chemical sensitivities can trigger a wide variety of symptoms. But in her case, it was just really major joint pain. She had trouble walking, and of course, being a musician, not being able to use her hands, you know, was an absolute tragedy. And we went the orthodox medical route for something like 5 years, huge expense. Really very harmful medications that were prescribed off-label, I might add. And in the end, we just had to figure it out for ourselves.
Right. Goodness. And then she's fine.
She's fine. She's wonderful.
I bet she never touches a soda.
No, we don't do sodas either. You know, we're at that age where we have to be very careful about what we eat, and the number of things I don't eat greatly outnumbers those things I can eat. We're trying to avoid GMO whenever possible. We're trying to avoid all chemical food additives, and you know, we don't get the yearly flu vaccine, and you know, we seem to be doing quite well.
I know. I was pretty much raised that way, and then I discovered that the gluten was a big problem for me. That was a red letter day when I discovered that and left it alone.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this has to do with the adjuvants in those vaccines that sensitize people to those chemicals and trigger an immune response to those chemicals, in addition to the immune response for the intended pathogen. That's where this whole peanut anaphylaxis epidemic came from. Prior to the use of peanut oil in vaccines, peanut anaphylaxis was virtually unknown. And now, of course, it's a major, major problem. It's skyrocketing right alongside the autism rates.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm 75, and I haven't been vaccinated since I was a little kid. So I was raised by parents that found out early on.
Well, you know, you were very lucky, and
you're not kidding.
Yeah, and you sound like you're in great shape, you know, for your AGE. But yeah, I think the more distant we stay away from that corporatized medical industrial complex, the healthier we're all going to be. And of course, that's the last thing they want. They don't make money unless the American population are permanently in a state of chronic illness or condition needing constant month-to-month treatments.
Mm-hmm. And that MSG is a deal that just makes people overeat.
Yes.
And so they have an unending quantity of patients.
Yeah, I mean, I have to avoid MSG because it's a migraine trigger. And but when
for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really nasty stuff out there. Anyway, Susie, thank you very much for your call. Thank you for the concern for Claire. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the gun rights issue. As you know, not too long ago, this liberal New York Daily News writer, Gersh Kuntzman, went on out and did this little story about, you know, America's love affair with the AR-15, and he fired one, and he said, oh, it was terrifying, and it was noisy, and I was traumatized by the firing of this AR-15. And from the description that he gave, it sounded more like a Barrett 50 than an AR-15. And to sort of underscore just how wimpy Kuntzman actually is, there was a video put up of this father very carefully, safely teaching a 7-year-old girl how to fire an AR-15. And her response after firing the gun, that was pretty good. She loved it. And what is really nice about watching that video is the care that this individual is taking, teaching her where the safety is, trigger discipline. Never put your finger on the trigger until the moment you intend to fire. Just that's the way gun safety ought to be taught. And this 7-year-old girl is going to grow up unafraid of guns, untraumatized by guns, and she makes Kuntzman look like this liberal wimp who's going to be hiding under the sheets anytime a firecracker goes off on the 4th of July. Anyway. Now, as you know, we have an article at my website on the right to keep and bear arms, and thanks to a reader, he did a reformat on my section on gun grabber quotes. It was in kind of sorry shape because it was from another source, and he fixed it up, and we reposted it to the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. And I'm going to give you just one of the quotes out of that. Gun violence won't be cured by one set of laws. It will require years of partial measures that will gradually tighten the requirements for gun ownership and incrementally change expectations about the firepower that should be available to ordinary citizens. This was in the New York Times back in 1993. And by the way, welcome to our on-air affiliates who are just now joining us. We're talking about gun control. We're talking about how the Senate actually voted down 4 gun control measures yesterday. And poor Kim Kardashian is so sad about all that. And we're talking about how the agenda by the gun grabbers has nothing to do with public safety. It's about their own safety. Because they understand the American people have reached the breaking point. And this goes all the way back to that Declaration of Independence. People are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. But when a long chain of abuses and so forth, there's a breaking point. And governments that want to oppress and plunder their people understand the people have to be disarmed. And every genocide of the 20th century was preceded by a gun ban on that targeted population. So you might want to look at these quotes because it really tells you what's going on. They're not concerned about crime and safety. They're concerned about protecting themselves from the people that they victimized. Remember, over in Great Britain, they passed a really strict Gun Control Act, which obviously didn't help Joe Cox. And after the Gun Control Act was passed, crime went through the roof. And so people were saying, well, obviously this was a wrong direction. And the British government's response was, well, the British people believe they're safer with the gun ban, even if they actually aren't, so we're going to keep it. Now, also invoking Orlando Senate Republicans are setting up on a new bill they're going to introduce to expand the FBI spying on you, the law-abiding American citizens. Now, the other day we were talking about how the Department of Justice is trying to get out of the situation that one of the gun dealers in Orlando tried to report somebody who was buying body armor and making very alarming statements, and they refused to sell him anything. And they called it on in, and the Department of Justice was saying, well, we didn't really have any identifying information. Well, gun stores have security cameras, and the FBI has this facial recognition system. They should have been able to find this guy, show a picture to the gun store dealer. They just didn't do it. And by the way, the vast majority of the 411 million photos in that FBI facial recognition database belong to law-abiding citizens. They're not spying on the criminals and terrorists. They're spying on you. Now, as you know, there's been a big stink regarding these phone calls that Omar Mateen supposedly made to 911 and a TV station while he was texting with his wife and posting to social media and presumably still holding his gun so that he wasn't attacked while fiddling with the smartphone. And at first they released a partial transcript, which they actually admitted had been edited for content. They removed Allah, changed it to God. They took out all the references to Islamic terror. And then because of the public outcry, they released a full transcript, which I don't think we can trust to be any more accurate, because we know they're lying about Orlando from beginning to end. Today, Attorney General Loretta Lynch is saying the government may release the actual phone call audio, and that should settle your mind. Unfortunately, no, because back in 2001, AT&T Labs introduced software that reproduces voices. It can recreate anybody's voice. It was being billed as something that could bring the voices of long-dead celebrities back to life. So after all this time since the shooting actually occurred, it's impossible to rule out the possibility of more fakery by the government. That's just the reality. We can't trust a thing coming out of this government or corporate media. If the government told me it was going to be a sunny day, I would feel morally obligated to take an umbrella out with me. Now, as you know, Israel is dealing with a declining image in the world. Everybody is seeing past the propaganda and realizing that Israel is basically trying to steal the rest of Palestine for itself. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is gaining ground, and everything Israel and its captive politicians in Britain and France and Canada and the U.S. are trying to do to stop it only makes the problem worse. Well, what is Israel going to do when they're having a public relations nightmare like that? It's time for another movie about Adolf Hitler. And they came out with another one. It's called Look Who's Back. And it's supposedly about Adolf Hitler didn't really die. He was put in suspended animation, and he wakes up in the 21st century. Blah, 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 blah. And it reminded me of this article I wrote, Tongue Firmly in Cheek, some time ago. A helpful suggestion for my former colleagues in Hollywood. And I went down examples from all the ridiculous movies about Nazis and Hitler, Nazi vampires, Nazi zombies. There's actually 10 films on that theme. Nazi werewolves, and all the rest of it. And then he's saying, well, you know, it's time to go back to that timeless Hollywood classic and retool it. Santa Claus conquers the Nazis. And it was a joke. And a year later, somebody actually came on out trying to actually do a movie, Santa Claus Conquers the Nazis. They're shameless, shameless, shameless. Now, for those of you living in California, Southern California Edison is saying they're actually running out of natural gas to run the power grid. And they're predicting there could be as many as 14 days without electricity. And they're saying this is basically because of that huge natural gas blowout from the storage wells in Alisco Canyon. And remember when it was all happening and they said, oh, it's not that big, it's nothing to see there. And then people went out there with infrared cameras and said, it was a disaster. It was like the Gulf oil disaster, only into the atmosphere. And now they don't have enough natural gas in storage on hand to keep the lights on through the coming summer. Now, speaking of cover-ups and lying about things, the current head of the Tokyo Electric Power Company has formally apologized over his predecessor's order to conceal the core meltdown in the reactors following that quake and tsunami in March 2011. And TEPCO's current president, Naomi Hirose, at a news conference said it is extremely regrettable. People are justified in thinking it as a cover-up, and absolutely that's true. Now, back when this was all happening, and there was that photograph of one of the reactor buildings exploding, and TEPCO and the U.S. government and the corporate media were all saying this was just a buildup of hydrogen gas that exploded. It was a gigantic cloud. There's only one problem with that. When hydrogen gas burns or explodes, it produces water vapor, which is white. It's basically a human-caused cloud. But that plume that came out of that reactor was colored brown. And as we pointed out at the time, that is the color of the quadrivalent form of plutonium dioxide. We knew it was a core explosion when it happened. They lied, they lied, they lied, they lied, they lied. Okay. Now, apparently, Wisconsin Watchdog is following an issue called the Madison Scandal. It's another inappropriate sexual assault situation, and apparently involved actual harassment. And the administrative law judge, Social Security judge, appears to have been suspended. Nobody's saying anything, but Administrative Law Judge John Pluss hearings have all been canceled or rescheduled to other judges. And apparently the office director, Laura Hodorowicz, is also absent from the office. And all anybody will say is they're absent from the office. So they're trying to contain that scandal. Now, here's a story that absolutely will infuriate you. It infuriates me. 8-year-old boy was on hyperactivity medication. Now, let me preface this by reminding you. The guy who came up with ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, shortly before he passed away, admitted it was a fictitious, made-up disease created to sell pills. Hyperactivity medication. This 8-year-old boy had been put on this medication. And apparently the pharmacist making up the medication made a mistake and put 1,000 times the active ingredient as should have gone into a capsule. And the boy died in the hospital. And apparently the pharmacist who made that error, nothing happened. No repercussions, didn't lose job, didn't get arrested, nothing happened. So we have an 8-year-old boy who's dead because he was prescribed a medication for a mythical disease that doesn't really exist, and then fell victim to a botched prescription pharmaceutical, and nobody gets punished, other than obviously the family. Now, there's a story that came out of anonhq.com about the 50 holistic doctors who have mysteriously died in the last year. And this all began back when Dr. Bradstreet was found dead a year ago on Father's Day in the U.S. He was a noted autism doctor, researcher, and a father, had family, was found in a river with a gunshot wound to the chest and immediately declared to be a suicide. Well, the family wasn't happy with that. They've hired their own investigator and their own forensics expert and determined there's no way this was a suicide. The angle of the wound entry just makes it impossible that this was a suicide. It's just like that hedge fund manager who we're being told committed suicide by slicing his own throat. And the families of all these mysteriously dead holistic doctors are out there saying it seems to be a combination of their involvement with GC math, which has the potential of being an absolute for real cancer cure, not a treatment, but a cure. One time, you're out of here. And the discovery that vaccines contain a protein called negalase that has no legitimate medical purpose whatsoever, but can interfere with the body's ability to fight cancer tumors. And when you look at the fact that vaccines are a $27 billion a year business in this country, that's motive to start killing people who might interfere with that flow of cash pouring into the medical industrial complex. I keep saying this, and I'm going to go on saying it again. This lust for money, this need to get money to make the bankers happy, has destroyed what was best about the American character. It's all eroded away. Our altruism, our care for our friends and our neighbors, it's all being ground away in that lust to get another piece of ink and paper so the bankers will let us go on living in our homes or driving our cars. And that's another reason why we ought to be looking at letting these private central banks fade into history. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to the gun issue, apparently actor Kurt Russell is saying that Obama should be kicked out of the White House right now. Not wait till January 21st of next year. Now. He is saying it is utterly absurd for Obama to be taking a position that taking guns away from law-abiding American citizens is somehow going to stop terrorism. And he's absolutely right. Way to go, Kurt. Now then, back to science and nature and the rest of it. Apparently up in Michigan, Michigan residents have lost their right to farm this week because of a new rule by the Michigan Commission of Agriculture and Rural Development. See, that word is popping up all over the place. It's commission, the European Union Commission, the Michigan Commission of Agriculture and Rural Development. We're going to run your lives. We're not elected, but we have the power to make you do what we want. So anyway, Gail Filburn of the Michigan Sierra Club is out there saying that this rule change effectively removes the right to farm act protection for urban and suburban backyard farmers who are raising food and small numbers of animals. They're trying to enforce dependence on a corporate supply chain, which could collapse. That's the danger here. Look at what's going on in Venezuela. Remember the other day I said the coming economic crash is going to be far worse for Americans because back in the 1930s, the American people were still spread out across the rural landscape. There was always a field nearby where you could be growing food. We don't have that anymore. Most of us have been herded into these giant human ranches called cities to make it easier to control and tax us. And we have a government that has enforced dependency on corporate-supplied food and water in order to keep us under control, without apparently realizing what's going to happen if that corporate supply chain implodes. Going to be eating each other in 3 months. Eat the rich. They're very tender, they're not radioactive, and they're GMO-free. Down in Florida, there's a couple that's been growing food on their own property, on their own home for 17 years. And apparently, local government officials said, you got to dig it up. You're only allowed to have grass and decorative flowers. Apparently, the Miami Shores City Council passed a new ordinance banishing all front lawn gardens. The couple is now suing, saying that growing your own food is a form of constitutionally protected rights. And yeah, it is. It's your land. You can do whatever you want on it. The government is forcing us all to be dependent on the system, just like King George III was doing to those American colonists in the 1770s. Remember what I said the other day about the Declaration of Independence is relevant today because we're back in that same form of tyranny that existed leading up to the Declaration of Independence. And we're going to be talking about that a lot over the coming days because we're coming up on Independence Day. We're going to have RIMPAC out here in Pearl Harbor, which means the Navy will put on a really good fireworks show to impress the other countries. But it's called Independence Day because that was when America broke free of forced dependence on Britain. That's why we don't call it Freedom Day or we kicked out the British Day. It's the day we broke free of mandated enforced dependence on a specific economic political system. That's what's going on here. Apparently there's been another crisis where some 37 million bees have been found dead in Canada after the planting of GMO corn in the local area. And we're not sure if it's the corn. And we know there was an article in Nature magazine several years ago showing that pollen from GMO corn can harm benign insect species. They were talking about the monarch butterfly and the decline that they were going through at the time. It could also be some of these pesticides that are tailored to the GMO seeds. If the honeybee population collapses, a lot of food production will go with it. Maybe that's Monsanto's goal, to get rid of the honeybees. So everybody has to buy their pre-pollinated seeds because they want monopolistic control over food production on planet Earth to keep us under their control.
To the Republic.
Hello, hi America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, not too long ago there was a big scandal involving tap water in Flint, Michigan, with dangerously high levels of lead and other contaminants. And it came about because of a purely economic decision to disconnect from a water provider and just grab water out of the Flint River. And at the same time, again to save money, chemicals that would have rendered the water safe and prevented the leaching of the water pipes was not used. And it's very short-sighted thinking, which seems to be the standard for government at all levels in this country, with the result that the water pipes are slowly being destroyed and the lead and heavy metals being leached out. We're coming out of those taps. And even if you can find a way, like chelation, to remove the actual lead from your body, the neurological damage is permanent. It's permanent. There's no way to reverse it. So we're looking at this article coming out of Natural News. And they have been running their tests on water from 230 municipal water samples across the country. I've been mentioning to you that you can get a water testing kit for about $20-25 online that will test for lead, microbe content, a wide variety of things. And you should test your water to know what's in there. And basically, Natural News came up with the fact that there is tap water all across the country. 3% of their samples came out with contamination above EPA limits. Erin Brockovich is running her own program. She says it's even worse than that. So here's the question. Why isn't the EPA doing anything about this? Why aren't they at least reporting to these cities, your tap water is dangerous? It's another cover-up. EPA is covering up the fact that the tap water in this country is not safe in all places. That's because the EPA, when it was set up by Richard Nixon, was not really about the environment, but about grabbing land to use as collateral on the national debt following the ending of gold convertibility. And that's why you never see the Environmental Protection Agency do anything other than grab land or act as a covert warrior in one corporation's war against another corporation. All right, let's grab a phone call. Eric in New York. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I was just calling about vaccines. Me and my fiance have chosen not to vaccinate our daughter, And every time we go to the pediatrician, she constantly grills us about it. Well, this most recent time that she went to the pediatrician, they actually said that they decided to let us go based on a new rule they came up with, that they're not going to be taking patients that don't vaccinate their children. So I just wanted to get your take on that and share that story with you.
Yeah, we've already heard that. Again, it's just part of this coercive idea to get us to buy and administer these vaccines because it's a $27 billion a year business. We had this medical journal came out the other day and said the practice of mixing multiple vaccines together in a syringe and sticking it into the arm is actually very, very dangerous. Nobody's ever studied it before now. And that may be one of the sources of harm from the vaccines. But it's all about pumping money out of the population. And given mistakes like that pharmacist who killed that 8-year-old kid, I don't know, maybe you ought to think about staying away from doctors as a whole. And just like Claire and I had to do with her joint pain, take responsibility for your own medical care. Because what we're getting from the medical industrial complex is all about selling product and not about health and wellness.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I just wanted to say thank you for everything you do. I think you're great. And you're kicking butt out there, and just keep it up.
Well, I will. It's just as long as I can. Thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, as you know, we're having snow all over the northern hemisphere. We had snow here in Hawaii a week ago, and NASA and NOAA are still out there screaming, it's the hottest year on record, it's the hottest year on record, May was the hottest May since the beginning of all time, blah, 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 blah. Because they're still pushing carbon credits and carbon taxes to suck more money out of the American people. Now, there is a problem with this approach to salvaging a hopelessly broke and in-debt government. When you come out with a rising Obamacare premium or a carbon tax, people have to give something else up. Medical care, or the new car, or clothing, or whatever. The actual revenue gain from all of these scams is virtually nil. There's only so much you can take out of a population when you've got 100 million Americans who can't find a job. And as a result, the tax revenue gain will be nil. What they're doing is fighting over the scraps that are still out here. It's not going to turn the situation around. Now, over in California, Governor Jerry Brown has been very much on board the United Nations 2030 agenda regarding carbon taxation and carbon credits. And it's hit a little bit of a problem because investors are not buying those carbon permits. They realize it's a scam. They're not going along with this. They may not even have the money to buy the carbon permit. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Alan in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just want to say great show yesterday. That was, well, you always have a great show, but extra great yesterday.
Thank you.
Anyway, I was calling. Do you think one of the reasons that that all these gun control new laws didn't pass because a lot of these congressmen and senators, kind of know what's up with all these false flags?
No, they could care less. They could care less. What happened was all of these gun rights organizations, mounted massive phone campaigns saying, call your senator, saying if you pass these laws, we will not vote for you in November, and that apparently turned the tide. People in Congress don't care what's right or what's wrong. They don't care about the propaganda. They're aware that it's all propaganda and nonsense. What they care about is maintaining their positions of wealth and power, and they don't care how they do it. What turned the tide was the realization that Americans are very angry, and any politician who tries to grab the guns is going to have a very uphill fight for re-election.
I was wondering about that. And then another thing is I forgot his name, but you were talking about the guy that turned himself in Santa Monica.
Howell.
He was participating, I guess, in another possible false flag. I'm just curious, do you think possibly they were setting up another one, maybe in Santa Monica, since that's where that guy lives?
Well, that's what the guy said, that he'd apparently met Omar Mateen at a training camp, for these things, and Mateen was sent to Florida, and he was basically, apparently the plan there was they were going to do a bombing at the Gay Pride Parade. And when he learned that Omar Mateen was dead, he realized that he was probably going to be the patsy and killed, so they had a convenient body to wag at the media, and that's when he turned himself into the Santa Monica police. But the FBI has taken over the investigation, and that's, the end of all information about what was happening.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, story coming out of the blacklisted news. The U.S. government wants to microchip all of our children as soon as they can, the near future. And obviously the idea of the chip is so our kids will grow up just being used to being tracked and monitored wherever they go, whatever they do. And we don't know what that chip is going to do. Probably more is on there than just where they are. Could potentially be recording the audio nearby, depending upon how deep it's planted. They're treating us like livestock. What do they microchip now? Dogs, cats, cows, horses. Now they want to do it to us. They want to treat us like we're farm animals, like we're livestock, like we're a herd. Now, here's another case of policy coming back to cause more harm than good. Over in Aurora, Colorado. And remember, Colorado has legalized marijuana. And banks and credit card companies will not do business with the marijuana stores because it's against federal law, and we always do what Washington, D.C. says. So as a result, inevitably, these marijuana dispensaries are cash businesses. And that makes them targets for criminals. And they have to hire security guards. And one of them got killed Saturday night. And they may have the perpetrators on the security camera. But here we have a case of government policy, or rather fiscal policy, where the banks are in high dudgeon. We will not do business with you. And it's actually caused a death. I think that's a very, very serious situation when they do that. Okay, getting on back to the water issue. Apparently up in Wisconsin, one of their cities has been given the green light to draw water from the Great Lakes. Apparently 8 states have approved a precedent-setting request that is raising concerns in Canada, because they share that lake, and in the U.S. Now, there had been an agreement banning diversions of water away from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River Basin. There is another problem. That water is heavily polluted. There are cargo ships going back and forth all the time. There's a lot of runoff from the shore. And apparently, along with all the other toxins, it has high levels of naturally occurring cancer-causing radium. But hey, that's good. That's good for the cancer industrial complex. We need you to have cancer. We'd have to close down all those cancer treatment centers, and we have to sell off the radiation machines, and who knows what we would do with all that chemotherapy. It's not like it's really good for anything. Do you see how private central banking is actually destroying our society and our civilization? Because as you get driven deeper and deeper into debt, which private central banks do by design, you start making little compromises. You start compromising on the quality of the product that you're selling or the service you provide. You cut corners. And that's why you have contaminated water coming out of the faucets. That's why you have GM cars that turn themselves off while you're driving. That's why that actor from Star Trek got killed by his Jeep. Everybody is cutting corners to keep the bankers happy. It's destroying our morality, because once you make that moral compromise, you can't turn around and go back. It's always a one-way street. We saw that even on Wall Street when they first started doing quantitative easing. Oh, trust us, it's just a temporary emergency measure. And now it's become permanent. They can't stop doing it. Because ultimately, the flaw in the private central banking system is that by design it creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. And that debt is used to control and enslave the population. And to transfer the real wealth of the nation, the assets, the land, the buildings, the farms, the factories, the homes, into the ownership of those bankers. They're literally taking ownership of the country, and all it cost them was ink and paper and numbers typed into a computer. It's a scam, and it's been going on for 300 years. And the fact that it has gone on for 300 years is no reason to tolerate it for another day. Not a single day. So when we talk about the blueprint for the new America and a new direction for our country, rule number 1, no more private central banks. Rule number 2, no more private central banks. Rule number 3, no more private central banks. And the first lackey who comes on in and tries to restart that scam and said, look, just sign your name here, we're going to start a whole new private central bank and everything will be hunky-dory. It'll be good times here and it'll be your great-grandchildren who are our slaves. We take that miscreant, we give him a good industrial thick coat of tar and feathers and run him out of town on a rail. Because every time they set up a private central bank, it's good times for the bankers and their friends. But as time goes on, eventually it leads to a crash. And all these people who set up the Federal Reserve, otherwise known as the Third Bank of the United States, 100 years ago, they knew what would ultimately happen. And they didn't care. As long as it happened after they were dead and gone, after lives of luxury and privilege and wealth, they didn't care. Somebody else's problem to deal with. And they just kicked the can down the road. And we're down the road. And that can has been kicked so much it looks like an old used gum wrapper. And that is really the problem. And it's just like how the government and the corporate media won't talk about the possibility of Hillary selling secrets from her email server. Nobody on Wall Street wants to talk about the fact that private central banks are inherently unstable systems. They cannot be made to last forever. Now, the good news is because of economic globalism, that whole corrupted system of enslavement could come crashing down all at once. And we're going to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to restart the global economy where the public currency is managed as a public utility and not a privatized for-profit scam. When the United States was founded, having a government-issued value-based currency was one of the revolutionary things they did. It certainly wasn't the model in Europe, and it horrified those European bankers. A government providing its own money and not borrowing it at interest from us? That's what led to the War of 1812, when Congress refused to renew the charter of that first Bank of the United States after seeing what it was doing to ordinary people. And that was back in a time when our Congress actually did look out for the good of the common people, because we had politicians who came from ordinary people. They had day jobs. They had businesses. Being in the government was a part-time honorary thing, not a permanent elevated lifestyle. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today on this Tuesday. Did you know that Hillary Clinton is the only first lady ever to be fingerprinted by the FBI? This was back in 1996 when there was the investigation into Whitewater, and the Clintons were ordered to turn over documents. And the Clintons said the documents had disappeared, and then they turned up again, and Hillary's fingerprints were found to be on them. Now, all those investigations back during Bill Clinton's term in office came to a screeching halt when the White House email server had a glitch, and over 1 million subpoenaed documents disappeared. And golly gee shuckies, somebody had manually turned off that backup system just a couple of days before. We have no idea how these things happen. Now, as we look at the aftermath of Orlando and the general awareness that this was another false flag, a lot of people are coming out in favor of gun rights. Up in New Hampshire, they had a car dealership. If you buy a new car, you get an AR-15 with it. Or if AR-15's too big, they'll give you a smaller handgun. Down in Florida, Greg Evers of the Panhandle Congressional District is out there. He's going to give away an AR-15 rifle. He says because terrorism is on the rise, and you can't rely on the government to protect you from terrorists, especially when you realize the terrorists are in the pay of the U.S. government. So, over in Great Britain, Lord Heseltine is saying that Britain could eventually join the euro if the Remain vote wins on Thursday. And that's a problem because the euro is on the rocks. It's in serious, serious trouble because of the predations of that European Central Bank. Britain kept its own currency, and it's not great, but it's certainly doing better than the euro is. But that's going to be another aspect. The Remain vote isn't about things staying as they are. It's about welding Great Britain even tighter to the European Union. And again, there's that wonderful movie out there, Brexit the Movie. It's a feature film-length documentary. And everybody who is in Great Britain should be looking at this film and understand. Gorbachev is right. The European Union is just the old Soviet Union dressed in Western clothing. They're run by a bunch of self-appointed, unelected rulers, whether you call it the European Commission or the Politburo. It's the same model. It's absolutely the same model. Brought back to life, reincarnated. It's risen from the grave like a zombie. And the reality is that the Soviet Union actually made a mockery of what Marx and Lenin were actually talking about. Because no political system is better than the morality of the people who control it. There's the music. Time to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay skeptical, stay informed, share what you know with everybody that you know. Thanks to those who are donating to WhatReallyHappened.com. It really does help right now. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's show. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.